Hello everyone and welcome to Popcorn Anatomy. I'm your host Ursula, and today I'll be talking once again about the amazing, incredible Orange is the New Black. But this time I'll be focusing on one character in particular, and that's the one and only Crazy Eyes. Crazy Eyes is definitely a fan favorite, and that's because she's hilarious and because she's won a special place in everyone's heart now that she's softened out a bit. But one question has been plaguing my mind ever since we saw a flashback from her childhood in season 2, and that is Crazy Eyes really crazy, or was she born with some kind of a disability? So for this video I did my research on the types of developmental disorders that exist and analyzed the character to come up with an answer to this question, and that's no. Crazy Eyes is in fact not crazy. She just happens to have been born autistic, and her random fits of anger and excitement, her odd way of speaking, and her strange facial expressions are all symptoms of a person with her condition being placed under the restraints that she has to go through. Let's look at the facts I've gathered. So before I start talking about the different types of autism and the characteristics of this neurodevelopmental disorder, let me get into actual mental illness first. Mental illness is not the same as a development disorder. Mental illness is more often than not acquired and shaped by setting and circumstance and will affect the victim's behavior and cloud their judgment, turning them into what people like to call crazy. Now, while there are over 200 different types of classified forms of mental illness, there are 5 major categories that these illnesses can be placed under. Those are anxiety disorders, mood disorders, psychotic disorders, and schizophrenia, dementias, and eating disorders. You can pause to look at this chart if you want, but we're not going to go very in-depth into any of these because Crazy Eyes, or Suzanne as you might want to call her, does not clearly exhibit any of the traits that make her mentally ill or insane as her nickname would suggest. And while there are several inmates on the show who certainly do exhibit traits of these illnesses, Crazy Eyes does not. While I was doing my research though, it struck me that I was the first to realize that Crazy Eyes had a developmental disorder and not a mental one. There were almost no theories or entries on the subject on any website, despite the fact that several of the characters on the show have said it. In Season 3, Episode 11, CO Birdie hints at Suzanne's autism. Then in Season 4, Episode 11, Sankey and another CO call her a retard. All of the inmates and authority figures in Orange is the New Black seem to know that the character is held back and not insane, so it's really strange that the audience hasn't figured this out yet. Even the flashback episodes of Season 2 and 4, they make it clear that Suzanne has always had some kind of developmental condition, because she's been like this ever since she was little. So this next part is going to be a little bit boring, so I'm just going to talk really fast. On the contrary to mental illnesses, neurodevelopmental disorders are most often genetic and cause impairment in the growth and development of the brain or central nervous system. Certain types of neurodevelopmental disorders such as apoplexy and paralysis are caused by traumatic injuries to the brain, but I won't be focusing on any of those. Instead, I'll be focusing on autism, one of the most common and most famous of these disorders, and what Suzanne most likely has. This is a condition that is different for each individual but is widely characterized by impairment in the fields of social interaction, verbal and nonverbal behavior, as well as restricted and repetitive behavior. Because there are just so many types of this one condition and each is different for everyone, experts eventually came up with the conclusion that there was just one autism spectrum disorder with 3 levels of severity, and based on what we know about Crazy Eyes, I'm willing to put her in level 2. Whew, that was difficult. So now that the boring part is over, let's talk about some of the symptoms that come with the condition and which ones apply to Suzanne Warren. Keep in mind that just because she doesn't have them all, it doesn't mean she isn't autistic. Very few victims of this condition actually hold all of these symptoms, and each symptom affects each person differently. First of these is abnormal body posturing or facial expressions. This is the most obvious of all the symptoms we'll be discussing. In fact, it's where Suzanne gets her nickname from. Her intense look and constant grimacing are all common characteristics of an autistic person, and her hunched body posture and stiff but long movements are all examples of abnormal body posture. Then of course are the behavioral disturbances and inappropriate social interaction. It's clear that Suzanne suffers from episodes of anger or excitement when she is triggered. This sort of anxiety attack is also not uncommon in people with stage 2 or 3 autism. We see this several times throughout the series, like when she freezes on stage, when she punches Piper because of a flashback, and when she gets excited and throws food in the cafeteria. And while Suzanne's inappropriate social interactions, like the whole Piper obsession in Season 1, are used mostly for the show's comic relief, there are also clear examples of autistic behavior. Another thing that always makes us laugh on the show is when everyone is talking about something specific in tabooed code, and Suzanne misinterprets it completely. Lack of understanding social cues is one of the most famous traits that comes with this condition, and it's something Suzanne does all the time. Another example of this is when Piper shows clear discomfort in being Suzanne's prison wife in Season 1, but she continues bothering her anyway. Or when Tasty's clearly pissed at something Suzanne has done, but she doesn't notice. One common trait in people with a condition like Suzanne's is the intense focus on one subject above all others, and while she doesn't have that, she does hold preoccupation with specific topics, which is just as common. For instance, Suzanne loves to work. She's held the same janitorial job since Season 1, and she loves it. Other inmates find it weird, but Suzanne just loves to work. She loves responsibility, and we see this in our most recent flashback episode in which she enjoys working at Home Depot. And like most of what we've mentioned so far, not everything Suzanne does is used for comic relief. Another very common characteristic among individuals with a very severe form of this condition is self-abuse when they sense they've done something wrong, and Suzanne does this quite a lot. Headbanging is a very common reaction in autistic people, and it's something Suzanne has done quite a bit on the show. Now I know I covered inappropriate social disturbances already, and that kinda goes under unusual reactions in a social setting, but it doesn't cover it completely, because the whole socially handicapped thing is a big part of what characterizes people who suffer from this condition so differently from those who don't. So it's clear that people with these differences don't quite understand the social norms or codes that the rest of us do our best to follow. A more social person with autism, however, will do his or her best to try and understand these rules in order to fit in better. That's when you'll get someone like Suzanne, who will seem overly enthusiastic and immature, but who is really just doing their best to be friendly and fit in. We see this most clearly in her flashback in season 4, where it's clear that she's been taught to act this way in order to make more friends, as opposed to her awkward childhood when she didn't really have any. And the last trait I'll be covering before we go is using odd words or phrases. Like many individuals with the same condition as herself, Suzanne uses odd words that kind of set her apart from everyone else. Words that may have a nice euphony or connotation to her, but that again are outside of most people's dictionary because they're outside of the current social norm. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why Crazy Eyes is not crazy. She's just different. If you enjoy this video, this is actually not the first one I've done on autism and television. Be sure to watch my theory on why these two characters from Bones and The Big Bang Theory have it as well. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more movie and TV show news, theories, and analysis. I upload every week. See you next week on Popcorn Anatomy.